Today is Sunday, April 12th, 2020, and you're tuned in to the Too Fast podcast, where the future farmers and agricultural specialists are serving you the weekly scoop on the world. I'm your host, Kandeaux the Farm Plug. The Too Fast podcast is brought to you by the Tuskegee University College of Agriculture, Environment, and Nutrition Sciences, Tuskegee University Cooperative Extension Program, and Anchor FM. We're currently available on many platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Breaker Audio, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and Radio Public. And here we are today with the Sunday Scoop and Weekly Recap. In Texas, COVID-19 patients in a nursing home were given hydroxychloroquine, a drug the FDA or Food and Drug Administration has not approved as treatment of COVID-19. The U.S. National Institutes of Health is currently tracking clinical trials of the drug. Additionally, the University of Minnesota and Columbia University are also running tests, and results are not expected back for weeks or months. The White House seeks to lower farm worker pay to help the agriculture industry. New White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, is working with Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue to see how to reduce wage rates for foreign guest workers on American farms in order to help U.S. farmers struggling during the coronavirus, according to U.S. officials and sources familiar with the plans. Trump's approval rating slumps amid coronavirus fallout. The nation's opinion of President Trump and his handling of the coronavirus pandemic are now on a downturn, as the economy slumps and the death toll mounts in the virus's wake. Since the shutdown of schools in response to the coronavirus, a recent study has shown that 4 in 10 U.S. teens say that they have not done any online learning since schools have closed. Even as Trump denounces vote by mail, GOP in Florida and elsewhere rely on it. With an election year pandemic, mail-in ballots may become an increasingly popular way to vote, especially in states like Florida that allow any voter to use them. And now we will have a pre-recorded interview with Dr. Lindsey Lunsford of Tuskegee University's Cooperative Extension Program. Today is Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, and you're tuned in to the Too Fast podcast, where the future farmers and agricultural specialists are serving you the weekly scoop on the world. I'm your host, Kandeaux the Farm Plug, and we're here today with scholar, activist, and agriculture advocate, Dr. Lindsey Lunsford of Tuskegee University's College of Agriculture. Dr. Lunsford, inspired by her alma mater, Tuskegee University, is setting the tone for the upcoming generation of urban agriculturalists. Currently working as a sustainable food system resource specialist through Tuskegee University's Carver Integrative Sustainability Center, Dr. Lunsford's work focuses on food justice and community sovereignty. She recently defended her PhD thesis on Soul Food as Healing, a restoring of African American food systems and foodways.
All right, so we're going to start off with the first question. What's some of the history of African American soul food?
Well, the term soul food really started becoming popular and used around like the Black Power movement era. So Amira Baraka, who was a famous like poet and activist of the Black arts movement, he's seen as coining the term as like, because he wrote this essay about soul food in the 1960s to answer claims of people saying that Black people, African Americans, had no cultural or ethnic food that tied them together. And so his argument was that we had soul food. And so if you notice, soul food is like soul music, soul brother, soul sister. It came out of that era of people reclaiming Black identity and soul. But soul food, the name might be new, but the plates and the dishes are very old, and they're connected to Africa and some of the oldest foodways in the world, actually West Africa, because we know Africa is a very vast continent, but our food that we eat today can be directly linked to recipes and practices that were going on in West Africa with our ancestors who were enslaved before they were enslaved. So soul food goes back to like before there was white supremacy and before there was colonization, to those very old traditional foodways. But also the one of the things that's not really known about soul food is it's not just a one continent lineage. Like soul food comes from three unique cultures and places, and that is Britain or Europe, Native America, Native Americans, and also Africa, West Africa. And those are really broad. Like, because, in West Africa, there's so many different nations and countries that are very unique and diverse. Same with Native Americans, so many different tribes and cultures and places, and with Europe. But if we were, for the sake of story, to just generalize, soul food represents those three cultures coming together and blending, like, their practices, and that's how we get the soul food we have today.
Many health studies have found that the Southern diet is strongly linked to heart disease, and some people consider, you talked about it, the Southern diet is sometimes mixed up with soul food, or they're one and the same, or something like that. Explain that for us.
Yeah, so there's as I got into my research about soul food and just African American foodways, there's a whole rich history and debate about what soul food is. So that's one of the reasons why it can be difficult to talk about it, because when you say soul food, it has a different connotation and meaning to a lot of different people. And so for some people, Southern food is soul food. Soul food and Southern food are the same thing. And also for some people, comfort food is soul food. And so some people equate soul food, Southern food, and comfort food as being the same. Or some people see definitely Southern food and soul food being the same. Other people have argued that they're completely different. That soul food is one thing, Southern food is another thing. It depends for restaurants how they want to market themselves, how they want to sell and appeal to their consumers. If you look around, you don't see as many soul food restaurants as you do. A lot of soul food restaurants, you might resonate as soul food, but it might be called Southern cuisine, Southern dining now. Also, many have argued, like in Michael Twitty's book, The Cooking Gene, that there's a strong racialized nature over, I can have a plate of fried chicken and collard greens and, some sweet potatoes. And for one person it's Southern, for one person it's soul. And it can be very racialized between which is which. For example, Southern food could be representative of white Dean and those recipes down home white Southern cooks, and then soul food can have the connotation of being for black cooks. So it's very, very interesting, and I try not to define it for anyone what it is or what it isn't, or say they are or say they aren't. I just highlight the fact that there's a rich argument out there, debate, discourse, however you want to call it, that people have been writing and talking about this for years. And interesting, I'll give you one example. There's a famous author, she's passed now, but she's like a mother to a lot of this, named Edna Lewis, and she wrote many cookbooks like A Taste of Country Cooking, The Pursuit of Flavor. And in her work, she said she ate Southern food. Because remember, soul food didn't even come into existence as a title until the 60s. So when I did my interviews for my dissertation with expert African American soul food experts, and I also call it African American heritage cooking. I got that from reading different scholars like Twitty that sometimes will call it African American heritage cooking. But yeah, so I just say that to say, when I talk to those older experts, they would tell me we just grew up, it was just called our food. This is just what everyone around us ate, what our parents ate. We didn't start hearing of it called soul food until we were in our teens and our 20s. And that was really because to them, it was just always the food that they had grown up eating. And so the last thing on that, so for Edna Lewis, she said she grew up eating Southern food, which was, to her, Southern food meant fresh, grown locally by yourself or your neighbor, Fresh, if it was meats, fresh farm raised meats, your own lard, cooking oil made from your pigs, like all natural, sustainable, quote unquote, what we would call organic today or health conscious today. That's how she saw Southern food. But she saw soul food as being the buffet line, greasy, heavily filled with like cheeses and processed canned foods. That's how she made her distinction. So it really just depends. You have to talk to a person and see what their definition of the food is.
Many health studies have found that the Southern diet is strongly linked to heart disease, and I guess we see that a lot now. So what do you think about it?
Everyone keeps saying there's a link between the Southern diet and poor health, but they cannot prove how Southern whites, it's the Southern diet, right? But it's the guilt is heavily put onto the black community when white and black Southerners eat the same foods. And so there's studies. So what he argued in the 90s is that why don't black and white people have the same health outcomes if they're eating the same food? It's got to be something else. And so I did some research and found a study by Yang et al. Where they surveyed older Southern blacks and whites and found that their diets are still the same. Actually, in the South, there wasn't a huge statistical difference between their foods, but whites preferred fried chicken in a small amount, like even more than blacks. So it's just like, and then if you look at health standards, African Americans consume as much, if not more, fresh fruits and vegetables as other ethnic groups. And so I feel like it's so much deeper. I was then invited by NCORE, which is the national, I might get this acronym wrong, but it's basically the National Committee on Obesity Research, and it's funded by USDA, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, CDC, and a few others. And I was called to be a discussant there about soul food. And one of the things that came out from them, and they wrote in the notes, was like, there is positive ways of food with coping with stress, and we've got to be careful of our demonization of soul food. And even when I was working on this project with a nutritionist, Dr. Christine Porter at a University of Wisconsin, University of Wyoming, she was talking to me about how the nutrition the field of nutrition has to become accountable for their role in the demonization of soul food, because it's not fully, in her words, where it's not even scientifically supported on the whole. And what I mean by it's not scientifically supported on the whole, home cooked meals are the holy grail of nutrition. That's what soul food is. Home cooked meals, heavy legumes, heavy vegetables. And I'll even tell you, when I went into the history of this, the whole concept of dessert was completely alien to Africans and the whole African diet. That was something that was introduced to them through enslavement and through Britain, because England and Europe, during that time, didn't eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. They actually hated fresh fruit. And the only way they would eat fruit was if it was stewed with sugar in pies. And so that's why it's like, when I started looking at the history, I'm like, whoa, so you mean Africans didn't know what dessert was? Europe was over here afraid to eat fresh, they thought it caused sickness. And they saw cabbage and things like collard greens as lowly poor people's food. But then you fast forward the script later and it's like, oh, we're eating all these sweets and we don't understand vegetables. When it's like our lineage, we have healthy places. We don't need to look to like the Mediterranean diet or this or any other culture's diet. We have some of the oldest foodways. There is health and nutrition and wholeness in our roots and in the food choices that are like indigenous and native, or that are ours, traditional to us. And when we start to put all the blame and the onus on people and their choices, like how many carrots you ate today, and not the fact like that you live in a system with mass incarceration and that you've been weathered. As Black Americans, we are weathered. And so that's like a theme of like, how much does your Blackness and racism and stress contribute to poor health outcomes? It's easy to blame a pork chop and not the prison industrial complex, because one is easier to get rid of than the other. And I'm not saying the pork chop has no effect, but I'm saying when you look at it, our food, when we were eating watermelons, we were being demonized. And watermelon is full of lycopene. So that's all I got to say.
Since the coronavirus spread, a lot has changed in all of our lives. One of the first questions in many people's mind was food source availability. Since you have been working as a sustainable food system resource specialist through Tuskegee University, how have you seen our food system change, our shift during this early stage of COVID-19?
Well, it was so funny doing this research and then this tragedy happening because it's like it was so many forewarnings and forecasts in the words of the expert elders that I interviewed. Like they were telling me, back in the day, we had our own home garden. We canned, we preserved food. We made all of our own cans. We did not go, like one of my interviewers, she was telling me, y'all go to the store way too much. We didn't go to the store like that growing up. We only went for staples, things we couldn't make ourselves, salt, pepper. She's like, we didn't go to the store for grits. We ground our own meal, made our own grits. They were heavily reliant on subsistence farming and gardening. And so when I look at this, it's like this is a major return in some ways. In some ways it can be a return to soul food in the aspect of like home cooked meals. If you didn't know how to cook before this, you're starving right now because it's like really the wisest thing is to stay in your house and cook your own food. A lot of people like for 3 days, after 4 days, they completely to cook, how to portion it, what to buy. Um, but back in the day, and it's not to just say nostalgia like the past. There are definitely people starving. There's always been hunger and poverty. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I'm saying people how to gather and prepare their own food. I think it's continuously been going down, especially when it comes to things like canning food, preserving food, and then just ways I've seen it change. Now we realize that restaurants were a part of the food system. I was doing some work right before this. I gone to Resistance Serve this year, back in February in New Orleans, and linked up with so many awesome industry folks. Shout out to the Collectress, Ashton Berry. Shout out Zella Palmer, University at Dillard University, and the Ray Charles program. Just so many awesome. Shout out to Nom Girls in Boston. Just so many awesome food movers and sommeliers and just people that are those are like wine enthusiasts. So many people that were like black and brown and in the space of the consumption side of things. Because I think a lot of times as a resource specialist, I've been trained to focus on production, the farmers, the growing the food, the transporting the food, the getting the food to the house. But we forget that a lot of the food ends up at the restaurant and gets cooked and prepared for people. And isn't the waitress that brings me my food just as important as the farmer that grew my food? And I think for a lot of people that answer is no, but it should be yes. Because they're a very important part of the food system and a part of our health and our well-being. So I think that this is forcing us to realize the restaurant industry. And right now, if you head over to Instagram and check out the creatress Ashton Berry, who runs Radical Exchange, is pushing some legislation, a petition right now to get some legislation called America's Table out there so that restaurant workers can have some supports for this, because right now they're completely devastated, and these are people with children, these are people with families. So and it's the collectress, yeah. So check her out if you can. Do whatever you can to support our restaurants and our restaurant workers right now, because a lot of them won't survive this. Some will because they're resilient, but a lot won't. And the restaurant is so important because a lot of times people can see slavery's connection to farming, but they don't see restaurants and tipping's direct connection to enslavement. That servers and waitresses and bartenders often are not paid a full minimum wage, or they're paid like $2.13 an hour. I'm not sure what the current rate is. And they rely off of a tipping system income that's directly rooted in slavery, because it was black people doing those jobs after enslavement. It was ensure that they wouldn't get a fair chance. So you can definitely look up the history on that, but definitely it was really cool to go to Radical Exchange, which was a conference in New Orleans, and they had shirts made that you could buy. And they said, like, tipping is directly related to chattel enslavement. And I was like, whoa. So it's like, yeah, our food system, heavily rooted in white supremacy, heavily rooted in the afterbirth of the I guess the reformation or the reshaping of enslavement in America. And so you can see these things. And now that there's a shock in the system, you can see the cracks in the system even more.
Another element of life that has changed for a specific group of people is college students, college graduation. COVID-19 has caused, I assume, every spring graduation across the United States as of now to cancel or postpone. Do you feel these universities should make some type of attempt to have some sort of graduation for these students who have spent so much time, energy, money, and much more to not only attain their degree but walk across this stage?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I myself, I know our graduation is being postponed right now, and I've heard of some schools' graduations that were completely canceled. And I've been trying to put myself in the mindset of where I was when I was an undergraduate, because by it being a graduate degree, it's my doctorate. Of course, I want to wear my robes and be with my family and everything, but I have a different type of mindset. Like, I know what it feels like to graduate. I know what it feels like to sit in there with all my friends and the like kind of panic, anxiety, excitement, all of that. I've had that before. So now I'm like, whatever, mail it to me, like, it'll be okay. Like, I just want to be happy and healthy and safe. That's my biggest concern right now for everybody. So I'm chill about it, but I could see other people, had this been my first, I wouldn't be so chill and it would be heartbreaking. And I think that this thing is going to cause I pray it doesn't, but I can feel it causing so many rifts and disruptions that can lead to like more cases of anxiety and depression and loneliness with people. So I think that whenever we can gather again and come together and celebrate, we should take every opportunity to. And that could be all these postponed graduations. Like, we're creative as a people. We're a culture. Let's flip it. Everybody's hurting from this. Let's transmute this pain into something else. Like, let's do some cool post-grad things. Send some kids some trips. Like, I don't have the solution, but I just know right now I wouldn't, if I was, my advice to any student in that position is to not put my energy into that. Like, to do whatever you can to advocate, to of course have your ceremony, look forward to your ceremony. But I think so many people have lost their lives and their jobs, their whole businesses. Like, imagine if you just opened a restaurant and you've been working for 10 years to get off the ground, or there's a million scenarios. So it's just like a lot of people are hurting and experiencing loss. So I wouldn't put my energy so hard into like, oh, my graduation ceremony, or oh, my prom. My niece is in high school. She just got her prom dress. So I know a lot of people are missing out and losing things. But if you're not missing your life or losing your health, then you got to count yourself as blessed and fortunate and focus on whatever you can be grateful for. I feel like gratitude is the only thing really keeping me sane. And I would give that to a gift to somebody else that's struggling, is please find something to be grateful for and hold on to that. And it sucks. I feel you. This is not the best for anybody. It's not the best scenario. And the school knows that too. It's not like the school want to cancel your graduation. So I just say to try to find some gratitude, and being sad about it is not going to boost your immune system. So I think the thing is to protect your health and then protect your feelings.
You just defended your dissertation. We are going to take a short break to congratulate you on earning that degree. And we definitely say earn because we all know very well how the journey to a HBCU degree specifically is strenuous and will test you in many ways. What are some skills you gained from Tuskegee University that will stick with you for the rest of your life?
Thank you for the congratulations. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying earned, because that does remind me it was a journey to get here. And I went to Tuskegee for undergrad. and now for graduate school. So it definitely has taught me, it's been teaching me a lot. Tuskegee University, and I've lived in the city of Tuskegee. So the city of Tuskegee, Macon County, like all of them have taught me so much. I think the biggest thing is like my self-worth grew so much in Tuskegee. Like my ability to see myself and to work with other people, I really found, like, I don't know, Tuskegee taught me a lot about me. And I think once you get your house in order, and I don't even mean the people around you, I just mean like yourself. Like once you get you together, you can like do so much good for others. So I think Tuskegee taught me a lot about myself, like who I was, what my self-worth was. Um, it taught me how to talk to people and how to work with people. I think I always had good like people skills and ways to like navigate or navigation, social navigation. But it definitely taught me just deal with like, you know, keep striving. Like when things are difficult and things aren't easy, to keep striving. And it taught me a lot about like loving other people. Like I guess you always have a heart or whatever, but it's just like just the love that people can have for things, for memories, for places, for who they were at certain points in their life. Like so a lot of people that love hard and a lot of people that love Tuskegee hard. And so all that love, like it eventually like rubs off on you and, you know, helps myself more. It's definitely a place. It doesn't look to tear you down. And I know everyone doesn't have that same experience, but I know with the experience that I've had, it's built me more than it's broken me. And I'm grateful.